All right, people, it's DSD Informed here. It's been a while since I've been up here, but I'm gonna go ahead and jump right into my thing. A while ago, I posted a video talking about RFID chipping and everything like that, and feel free to check that out. It should be on my page. If you're watching this, you should be able to find it pretty easily. Um, but in that cluster, I also came up with a lot of other different video ideas, and today I had enough time. I'm caught up on some reading and things like that. I've been doing a lot of studying and everything like that, so I can provide better information. So this is where I'm at with this. Um, my whole thing with what's going on now is this ideal of polygamy, and polygamy is a man having more than one wife is what that is. And I caught a lot of backlash for it because, especially here in the States, it's very taboo to even talk about something like that. If I'm not mistaken, I think it's even illegal to legally have more than one wife. That's where concubines come in, and I'll discuss that part later. But what I found was I caught a lot of women trying to give me the mail order of, oh, the only reason you say that, the only reason you believe in that is because you're a man, you want to have more than one wife so that you can fulfill some sexual fantasy type thing. And that's not the case. I started believing in the ideal of polygamy as a youngster, actually. And it comes from the fact that if you look into the rest of the animal world and the rest of any other species around the world, there's not too many that pair off. Literally one male and one female and are together forever. There's not many. And even if there were, if you can name thousands, they're compared to the millions of different species. So even if you can give me a nice number, a nice cluster of them, it still doesn't compare to the others. Now, also with polygamy, I started considering it because when you look at it, women outnumber men by a mile. I'm not exactly sure. I looked up different statistics and I couldn't get a solid number, but let's say we shoot it off and say women outnumber men 1 to 10. So for every 10 females that are on this planet, there's only one male. Okay. So let's say you get the gay women, women that like women, so that's two gone. So now you're down to 1 to 8. Let's say you get we'll say the unattractive women. Let's say it's two of those. So now you're 1 in 6. But there's still 6 women to every one man. And let's say you get the woman that can't have kids or doesn't want to have kids, so you really don't want to be with her. Because we're talking about reproduction here. So you're just 1 to 5. We can even break it down to a point where you eliminate women down to the fact that there's only 1 to 3. You eliminate 7 other types of women. And still 1 to 3, which still women outnumber men. So if every man got with a woman singularly, excuse me, there would still be 2 women. So all men are taken. That one man, says 3 women in the room, that man gets 1. What are those 2 women left to do if they don't fit in those other categories? So a population thing played a major role into it for me because, like I said, it just seems like the world was created for that reason. And I feel like that reason comes around because, 2, a man, which has been done a lot, can impregnate multiple women at one time. And unfortunately, this is happening in cases where you're dealing with men who don't want to take care of their children and don't want to do what they're supposed to do. But myself, talking about being a polygamist, taking in multiple wives and taking care of my women like I should do as a man, or what has been bestowed upon me like I should do as a man, and also taking care of my children the way that I'm supposed to, I'm frowned upon. But there's still men walking around here that are allowed to sleep with multiple women, and the women know it. Like it's not a secret to them. It's not a secret to us that it's going on, and it's okayed. It's still viewed in a negative manner, but it's okay for him to screw around and have multiple. But a man that's looking to actually take charge and take care of what he does, take responsibility of his actions, that's a no-go. So, I was listening to a broadcast. Actually, excuse me, I was watching it, and it had Dr. Umar Abdullah Johnson, who I'm a big advocate of, had him up there speaking, and in that, a woman called in. It was a phone cast that they were doing, but they actually had a recording of it. And the lady spoke on it, and when she spoke on it, it really opened up my mind to it because you don't hear many women women, excuse me, I'm combining words, women advocating, that's what I was getting into, that that type of lifestyle. And she told him, you're the type of man that deserves many wives because you're the type of man that's going to raise your children a certain way. They're going to be productive. They're going to have certain mindsets. And ultimately, you look to father in a better generation over time. That's another thing, too. I started thinking about polygamy in a sense because there are a lot of, as I said before, no good men that are fathering children who aren't taking care of their children, or there are no good men in general who are fathering multiple children and aren't good men at all, so they're raising their children in a negative light. Now, when it comes to the ones that do their job, the men, like, my father, for instance, my father was not perfect, not even close to being perfect, but he did everything he could, up until the day my father passed. He was always there for me. He was always my father. He was always my best friend. He's the type of man that if he wanted to, I would agree with my dad having my mom and another woman and maybe another woman and having 8 or 9 or 10 or 15 kids. Why? Because if he would have been able, if he had a capacity to give them what he gave me, so that my brothers and sisters could have come out to be like myself or even better than myself or way beyond myself in an even greater magnitude, that would be amazing. Imagine 15. That's an average size classroom for college, but let's say you have a neighborhood and you have one neighborhood and there's 100 kids, all of those being raised by similar types of men doing the proper thing. What type of society that you're going to be looking at when you have this on a multiple level? So that was just something that really came to my mind. Now, the backlash of this, there's some negatives to it. One major negative that I caught, well, excuse me, not really negative, but arguments against it were from people from a biblical standpoint, from a religious standpoint. And they talked to me about how, man should only be with one woman, because in the Bible it says that, like pretty much the interpretation goes that a man of God or a man of Christ, excuse me, this is New Testament, and they talk about should only, be the husband of one wife. There's many interpretations of that, but I feel like if we look at the Bible as a whole, especially if we're looking at the, I call them, there's another word for it, but I call them the Abraham religions, which are Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. Those three are all born, literally, they were all born from a polygamous relationship, because Abraham himself had 2 wives. Well, technically he had a wife and a concubine because his wife couldn't give birth at the time, but she did end up giving birth. And out of those 3 children, you get these 3 religions. These 3 major world power religions come from a polygamous relationship. Abraham's sons, all went into these relationships. And more specifically, Jacob, who had 4 wives, 2 official wives with Leah and Rachel, and then he took on, I can't think of how to say her name, but I know it was Zilpah and Bilhah or Bilhah, something. Y'all correct me on that. Somebody comment and tell me how to give me like a breakdown of the proper saying of her name. But he took on 4 wives, and of those 4 wives, the 12 tribes of Israel were born. So, again, polygamous relationships are creating these parts of our culture in our lives. And there's a sect of black people that believe us to be the Hebrew Israelites, which is fine, which means we come from the tribe of Judah, which means our father of the father came from a polygamous relationship. So, I get into, and I ain't even touch on one more, King David of the Jews. Of course, he had Bathsheba, and we all know the story about how he got her, and if not, it's a whole different conversation to be had. But it biblically speaks about, and this is coming from that biblical argument, because these are the 3 major religions that control the world. Henceforth, these are the 3 ones that have the most influence. Therefore, they're the arguments that have to be fought, because most of the time these are the people who you're going to come up against. And those are the ones that I've come up against. And David himself had Bathsheba, but he also had many other wives and concubines. And a concubine, long story short, is like a mistress. She's almost like a secondary wife. But she's part of the relationship. He's not sneaking off with her. She's there. She's known about. She's agreed upon. And she's usually there for sexual purposes, really. So, you know, it even speaks to somebody in the Bible, I can't remember his name, but he had like 700 wives. Like 700 between wives and concubines and all of this. He reaches the up parts of 700. And I think he has some even more than that, almost 1,000, depending on how you want to do the math and how you interpret it. But again, the arguments that I get from Christian people, or from, I've had some from Muslims as well as Jews, but it's like your argument, you're basing it on your religious text, but your religious text also tells us that we as an ultimate people were born from the type of relationship that you're telling me is bad. There's a show that started coming on TV. It was mostly surrounding white people, but it's no problem. And ultimately, it was about polygamy, a man having multiple wives, living in and everything like that. So I watched it, I tuned into it so I can get insight on what a real polygamous relationship looks like, and a true agreed upon, not a sneaking around relationship. And it's amazing because you learn about the jealousies. Like the women sit up there and they talk about, sometimes you get jealous, sometimes you might feel lonely, sometimes you might feel like you're second rate, depending on how things flow. And I found it interesting because now I'm learning about the negatives. You know, I'm learning the other side of the story from a first-hand perspective. It's not just me thinking about what could go wrong or what could happen, but this is actual people living it telling me what's going on. And it's really interesting. And a final touch-up on this, as to, you know, my thing about it is, I have a mentor who shall not be named, but he years ago entered into a polygamous relationship, type of situation where he had and he does, and it works out fine, because one, when you do these types of things, you don't just rush into them. It's something that you have to talk about. It has to be agreed upon by the members at hand, because you all have to get along and have to deal with each other. So if you have 8, 9, 10 kids from different angles, those kids need to know, like, this is daddy, this is mama 1, 2, and 3, however you want to work that out. And they have to get along. They have to coincide. And that, speaking of another thing, nowadays, most women only want to have 1, 2, maybe 3 kids. There are not a lot of women who want to raise big families. So, in my mind, I said, mathematically speaking, you increase your chances of multiple children by having multiple women. So, if I wanted 13 or 14 or 15 kids, and one woman didn't want to bear that, why go out and cheat or try to create more and more children that way, when I can simply have multiple women produce the multiple children? I know it sounds, it's a lot deeper than that. There's a lot to it, but to me, I felt like it was more functional. And then, as a revolutionary type individual who's looking to move my people in a different direction, I felt that such revolutionaries, you know, those that we know that are famous, that everybody is, you know, they're world renowned, to those who don't, you know, we don't know about, I thought in my head that it would make sense for them to raise multiple sons and multiple daughters, because they would instill in them proper values that ultimately we look to help our people and progress our people forward. To me, it makes no sense if you're Malcolm X, or you're like a Malcolm X, you know, for you to have just one son, because life happens. You might die young, or this, that, and the third. So why not have 6 or 7? You have a greater legacy. You now have a better troop. You have soldiers now that you can train, because that's one thing too. Instead of fighting a systematic brainwashed child or adult to get them on the right angle, you're raising them from the birth of. You're able to instill in them what you want from the very beginning, and you're able to get it where you want them to be. And I just feel like that's more functional. And that's why you look at a lot of families and other cultures who have very large families, and they stand very strong together because they come together and they're having multiple children everywhere. And the village helps raise the child. That's another thing, the reason why I think it is too, is because I feel like that will bring us together as a people more. Because now you have women who have to work together as a village, so to speak, to keep the household running. And then I think that too would increase both the marriage numbers, and it's been said and it's been statistically proven that more married couples hang out with other married couples, or married people in general hang out with other married people. So if we have more and more married individuals in our culture, in our own personal society, then that's going to increase the number of us that hang out together, therefore increasing the size of the village. And ultimately, that's what we need to get back to. There was a time when that was us. That's no longer the case. So with all that being said, I'm Disney informed. I just got a message. I'm about to get up off of here. Y'all have a blessed week and have a blessed life. Think it's not illegal yet. Swag. Peace.